Konnichiwa guys, so today we were studying about bone of upper limb, humerus. Now, first of all, we need to understand the basics that humerus is a long bone. And what are the characteristics of a long bone? It has medullary cavity, right? And then it is horizontal. Long bones are horizontal, and medullary cavity horizontal, and yeah, they ossify in cartilage, right? And oh sorry, I meant vertical, sorry. Vertical, yeah, vertical, ossify in cartilage, have medullary cavity, they have two ends and one shaft, right? So these are like one of the many characteristics of a long bone. Now humerus is a long bone. Okay, humerus has two ends and one shaft, right? Now we'll talk about the upper end, and before coming to the upper end, we'll first look into the side determination as to how you determine whether it's of the whether the humerus bone you have been presented with is of the right side or the left side. So basically, first of all, this huge expanded part as compared to the lower end is flattened out, whereas the upper end is sort of bulged out in a way. So it will help you distinguishing between the upper and lower end. So upper end is like this and the lower end is flattened out. So the upper end, now we have determined whether we have held the bone upside down or the right way. So after that we will see there's this thing called tubercles. These two are tubercles, okay? This one, this one, and this one, these both are tubercle. This one is greater tubercle, this is lesser tubercle, right? As you can see, this is bigger, this is smaller. So this greater tubercle is usually, well, it is like laterally, okay? You know what lateral is, right? Away from the body. So yeah, and the head, this is the head. So this is the head. Head is directed upward and backward and medially. As you can see, it's medially and it's upward, little bit upward, and it is backward. See, it is backward, right? Like backward. So yeah, now let's talk about the features of the upper part, and we'll simultaneously go through its attachments and insertion and origin and everything involves the upper part. Okay, upper end. So the upper end has a head, and this part is the neck. Okay, now talking about the neck, it has three types of necks, like anatomical, morphological, and surgical. Okay, so anatomical is basically, where the capsule of the shoulder joint lines, and it lines the anatomical neck, whereas the morphological neck is basically the junction between the diaphysis and the epiphysis of the fusion of these two bones in the adult bone. Okay, in the young bone these are separated right away through epiphyseal plates, right? But over here it's more like they fuse and they form morphological what do we call, like morphological neck, right? Now 0.5 centimeter below this morphological neck is something called surgical neck. Now the surgical neck has its own importance because this site is the most commonest site where fractures usually occur. Okay, now because of the fracture at this neck, because of the fracture in this neck, it leads to injury of the structures surrounding this neck. Okay, so it's also a very important viva question. The structures surrounding it are posterior and anterior circumflex humeral arteries. That comes out from the third part of axillary artery, right? And the second is the axillary nerve. Okay, so these are the structures which get injured upon the fracture at the surgical neck. Axillary nerve lesion or injury will lead to that paralysis on the, it's like not paralysis, but you lose sensation from this part of your the lateral part of your arm, and that loss of sensation is more like it's like a regiment badge sort of. Yeah, so lesion of the axillary nerve leads to loss of sensation on the lateral side of the lower half of the deltoid muscle, uh, in a badge-like area, also called regimental badge. Okay, an axillary lesion of this nerve will affect the muscles this nerve is supplying. Okay, so axillary nerve supplies deltoid muscle and teres minor. Okay, now there will be paralysis of both these muscles. Deltoid muscle paralysis leads to the atrophy of the muscle, and the rounded contour of the shoulder is lost. And the greater tubercle is more prominently seen, right? And we also know that deltoid helps in the abduction of the arm from 15 degree to 90 degree, up to 90 degree. So the patient won't be able to abduct his arm up to 90 degree, but will be able to after 90 degree with some help. So this is what will be happening. Now we have we are done with the upper part, I guess. No. Now we will talk about the greater and lesser tubercle, and between the greater and lesser tubercle, from the greater tubercle, a sort of ridge extends and anteriorly, whereas posteriorly from the lesser tubercle same thing arises, and the groove formed between these two lips is called bicipital groove. It is also called intertubular groove, I guess. Intertubercular sulcus, sorry. It's also called intertubercular sulcus. Okay, so we are done with this one. This. Okay, let's talk about the shaft now. Now the shaft has 3 borders and 3 surfaces. Okay, so this is the lateral border, this is the medial border, and this is the interior border, right? Interior border isn't that straight, but yeah. Now talking about the surfaces, it will have anterior lateral, anterior medial, and posterior surface. And this is the posterior surface, right? Now let's talk about the anterior. There's not much to talk about the anterior, medial, anterior lateral surface, because the main boss over here is the posterior surface, because the posterior surface has something called radial groove. Right. Now the radial groove is a very important feature that is within the posterior surface of the humerus. Why is it important? Because fracture of the humerus can also occur at this groove. Right, so now we need to know the content of radial groove. It is a viva question, right? It is a very important viva question, right? And what is it? The what do we call this? Yeah, the content. The content is profunda brachii artery and radial nerve. Now, profunda brachii artery is a branch of brachial artery. We don't know where the brachial artery starts from, right? Don't we? It's okay if you don't know, I'll tell you. Brachial artery starts from the lower border of the teres major muscle. Okay, and before crossing the inferior border of the teres major muscle, it is axillary artery. Okay, and before axillary artery, before crossing the outer surface of the first rib, it is the subclavian artery, I guess. Let me check. It is subclavian artery. Okay. Now the radial nerve lesion leads to Saturday night palsy and wrist drop. Yeah. Okay, Saturday night palsy is, it's like on Saturday night you're partying on something, and then you come late at night and then you fall asleep on your chair with your arm hanging on the edge of the chair or something like that. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like you're like this sleeping, and this is the chair and your hand is like this, so this compresses the nerve, right? So why does it lead to wrist drop? First of all, we should know that radial nerve supplies the extensor compartment of the forearm. Okay, the posterior compartment is the extensor compartment. So the extensor compartment muscles get paralyzed, you cannot lift your or extend your wrist. Okay, so because of that, it leads to wrist drop. Okay, yeah, nice. So we have talked about this, and there's also one more thing. On the anterior lateral side, there is a tuberosity called deltoid tuberosity. Okay, where the deltoid muscle inserts the middle of the anterior lateral surface. Okay. Now we will talk about the lower end of the humerus. The lower end of the humerus is flattened out surface which has fossas in it, and we shall see what else. So, okay, I'll tell you about the general shit that's present over here. Anteriorly, okay, the lower surface also now the lower surface has this pointed projection called trochlea. You can remember it's pointed and it's trochlea because it's T, like it's pointed. That's how I remembered it. So this is it, and then this is the capitulum. Really just gotta remember this shit is fucking annoying. And then this is our coronoid process. Fossa. And this is our this part. This is radial fossa, and behind it is our olecranon fossa. This olecranon process of the ulna sort of like because it accommodates the olecranon process. Okay. Now these are called condyles. These are like, this is like epicondyles. This is the medial epicondyle. This is the lateral epicondyle, and the upper line, the lateral medial border, and in this medial condylar ridge, whereas the lateral border of the shaft ends in the lateral supracondylar ridge, right? So these are the ridges, fossas, and everything. Okay, now we will focus on the attachments. Now we will talk about the muscles. Their function is like presence of intermuscular septum, lateral medial. It leads to the division of the entire arm compartment into anterior and posterior compartment, right? So the anterior compartment is basically entire anterior compartment consists of basically the muscles which help in flexing of the arm. Okay, the sort of flexor compartment, let's say. So the muscles it contains is like bicep brachii, brachialis, and coracobrachialis. Okay, now we have to know the insertion and or origin and insertion and nerve supply of all these muscles with their action, which is mainly flexion, and we won't be focusing more on the what do we call it, the function, but rather the overview. So the bicep muscle has, bicep means two heads. Okay, so it has two heads, one long and short head. The long head basically, the long head of the bicep originates from the superior glenoid tubercle, and the short head of bicep brachii originates from the lateralmost tip of the coracoid process of the scapula. This and this. The long head of the bicep brachii, the tendon of the long head of the bicep brachii passes through the bicipital groove and is intracapsular in shoulder joint. Intracapsular in shoulder joint. Yeah. It's present in it is present in the capsule of the shoulder joint. Okay. Passes through the capsule of the shoulder joint. Whereas, okay, so this other head, I go like this, and the insert where I'll tell you. Then the insert on the radial tuberosity. Insert on the radial tuberosity. Okay. Now the bicep brachii, it's we should know that the anterior compartment of the arm is usually supplied by musculocutaneous nerve, and it pierces the coracobrachialis muscle, right? Coracobrachialis muscle, and terminates at the lateral cutaneous branch of lateral cutaneous nerve of forearm. All right. So yeah. Now this is it. So this is our bicep. Now we'll talk about our coracobrachialis muscle. Now the coracobrachialis, also like the name suggests, it coracobrachialis means it originates from the coracoid process, little medial to the short head of the bicep, right? And then it inserts on the medial border of the shaft, the middle of the medial border of the shaft, middle of the medial border of the shaft. Alright, so this is our coracobrachialis. It's also supplied by our musculocutaneous nerve, and musculocutaneous nerve pierces the coracobrachialis to continue further, going from medial to the lateral part of the arm. So now talking about brachialis muscle. Brachialis muscle has something interesting about it. It's like a hybrid muscle because it is not only supplied by musculocutaneous, it is also it's also supplied by the radial nerve. The proprioceptive sensations are carried via radial nerve in this muscle, right? And it flexes the elbow joint, right? And whereas bicep brachii and coracobrachialis, the bicep brachialis is one thing, it is a strong supinator. Okay, so yeah, so brachialis muscle originates from the lower half of the anterior medial anterolateral surface, right? Anterior medial anterolateral surface, like this, and then it inserts where? Then it inserts on the ulnar tuberosity, right? Done. So these were our anterior compartment muscles, and now we will talk about the posterior compartment, which mainly consists of tricep muscle and I guess tricep brachii and maybe tricep muscle, I guess. Now let's talk about a posterior compartment that consists of muscle tricep brachii. Okay, so the tricep brachii is supplied, basically the posterior compartment is supplied by the radial nerve, right? And the radial nerve originates from the posterior cord of the brachial plexus. Okay, posterior cord of the brachial plexus. Now tricep muscles has 3 heads: lateral, medial, and long head. The long head originates from the lower glenoid tubercle of the glenoid cavity, and the lateral head of the tricep brachii originates above from the radial groove, whereas the medial head originates from the originates on the posterior surface of humerus below the radial grooves. Right, the medial head is below the radial groove, whereas the lateral head is above the radial groove. Upper lip of the spiral groove. Let's just say upper lip of the And where does the tricep insert? I'll tell you. It inserts on the superior surface of the olecranon process. The superior surface of the superior part of the posterior surface of the basically inserts on the posterior part of the superior surface of the olecranon process. Okay, so this was our muscle, right? So now we have talked about the muscle, the attachment, the nerves, right? Now we will talk about our what else? We shall now talk about the anastomosis on scapula, ball and socket shoulder joint. Then we shall talk about the elbow joint.